Probably not. I wasn't.
Precision.
Yeah,
Of course.
yeah, well, so.
Will the Senate please come to order? Our devotional exercises will be conducted by the Reverend Joe Welker of the East Craftsbury Presbyterian Church. Welcome.
Good morning.
All right.
It's an honor to be with you this morning from, indeed, East Craftsbury Presbyterian Church. My name is Joe Welker. I'm the pastor there. I confess I don't know much about any of you here, except that you all hold a literal seat of power in the smallest state capital in one of the smallest states of the country. And you don't know much about me, except that I say I hold a seat of power in an even smaller building in an even smaller town in one of the smallest states of our great country. There are a lot of rules around devotionals and what I could say, as I was informed, which limits what I'm able to talk about this morning. But I also know my grandfather would say that every rule has a story behind it. And so I thank the clergy who came before me for gifting us stories that gave us these rules. My grandfather was Colonel Joe Welker, and part of his story was serving under and loving Major General Wing, whose portrait, as you know, hangs in the Cedar Creek room. There's another proverb about stories. Before you change the rule, know the story as to why it was there. I know you all are tasked with setting lots of rules in our state. And even though we don't know much about each other's stories, all the stories that brought us to this room at 9:30 at the end of April in Vermont, we know that each of us is holding not just our stories, but the stories of so many people in our hands. And so I ask that as you proceed forward in your work, please don't forget all those stories that you carry with you and those ones that you haven't heard. Be open to hearing new stories that challenge the ones you're familiar with. We have all been gifted the power and burden of shaping the stories, not just of people here in Vermont, but of humans everywhere. Remember that you did not write your own story, but that you have been born into an even greater love story since the dawn of creation. John Donne said that no man is an island, and this is even truer in our beautiful landlocked state. May your rules honor all of our stories. Thank you.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any announcements? Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to let everybody know that we have a colleague, Senator Hart, who is going through some procedures. He might have had a little bit of a setback, but not life-threatening. But if everybody could just have Senator Hart in their thoughts, I would appreciate it very much.
Are there any further announcements? We have a Senate joint resolution, JRS 24, joint resolution relating to weekend adjournment on May 2nd, 2025.
Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives that when the two houses adjourn on Friday, May 2, 2025, it be to meet again no later than Tuesday, May 6, 2025.
Question is, shall the Senate adopt the resolution on its part? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we've adopted the resolution. Orders of the day. We have S27 was passed by the House with a proposal of amendment. The question is, shall the Senate concur in the House proposal of amendment? I recognize the senator from Chittenden Southeast, Senator Lyons, speaking to the proposal.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you would recall, this is the medical debt bill. And within the bill, there is $1 million, and also within the budget, there is $1 million in support of the program described in S27. Section 2 is a section that is not relevant to the bill at this point. It includes language regarding other monies that will or will not be appropriated in various ways and better belong in the budget where they currently are. So Senator Perchlik and I, a senator from Washington, Chair of Appropriations, and I are recommending that Section 2 be deleted in its entirety. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Lyons has moved that the Senate concur in the House proposal of amendment with further proposal of amendment. Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and we have concurred in the House proposal of amendment with further proposal of amendment. Let's see, 96. Okay, we have H96 for third reading. Are there any amendments prior to third reading? Listen to the third reading.
H96, an act relating to increasing the monetary thresholds for certificates of need.
The question is, shall the bill pass in concurrence with proposal of amendment? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we have concurred with the proposal of amendment on H96. We now have H488. We have on the calendar for action H488, which was passed by the House on March 26, 2025. It was referred to the Committee on Transportation, which reports it has considered the bill and recommends that the Senate propose to the House that the bill be amended as it appears starting on page 1029 of today's calendar, and that with such proposal of amendment, the bill ought to pass. Affecting the revenues of the state, the bill was referred to the Committee on Finance, which recommends that the bill ought to pass in concurrence with the proposal of amendment as recommended by the Committee on Transportation. Affecting the expenditures of the state, the bill was referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which recommends that the bill ought to pass in concurrence with the proposal of amendment as recommended by the Committee on Transportation. Listen to the second reading of the bill.
H488, an act relating to fiscal year 2026 transportation program and miscellaneous changes to laws related to transportation.
Recognize the senator from Lamoille, Senator Westman, for the report of the Committee on Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Usually at this time, when one gets up to give a presentation on a budget, or whether it's the T-bill, the general fund, or you stand up and you tell everybody how great you did and what a great job that we all did. And in some respects, that's right this year. But what I think I need to do before we do all of this is talk about where we are and what the situation is around us and where we are. It's because this is a little different situation than most budgets that you would face. I need to set the stage on where I think we are in transportation, and I can't do that without telling you that there are dark clouds in our future, and that what you're looking at this year is probably the last really good year before we, excuse my pun, before we hit some really bumpy roads. we're literally approaching a point of no return for the transportation fund. The structural problems facing the T fund are real, and literally I can't see without fundamental change how we can build budgets going forward. We don't lose, we do lose ground after this year if we don't do something. And I mean that in every level of this budget. And it's whether I'm talking about public transit, I'm talking about our roads, I'm talking about our support for our communities and municipal budgets. It's almost at every place. What you have before you is a good budget for this year. What lies ahead here is something that bumps up against the general fund, it bumps up against the T fund, and it bumps up against all of this other state spending. The T fund and the general fund have through the years helped each other out, helped us put together spending packages. We've long talked about JTOC. We've long talked about the monies for EVs that have come from the general fund that have helped us support moving to electric cars. This budget this year, part of the reason it has come together is there are $12.5 million in surplus general fund dollars coming into this budget. We eliminated finally the JTOC transfer, which started in 1991. And we have federal FEMA monies that have helped us cover the holes and put this together. Those monies will not be there next year. The JTOC money to a small extent, but I don't believe we can expect every year the general fund to help hand $12.5 million over. The FEMA monies will not be there. So we are on the edge going forward and what we're looking at. But there are good things, and we take steps in this budget that I think are very important. It's balanced, and we've done that with the help from other areas. We do something about medical transports. For many of us in rural areas, we're seeing a downsizing in services in hospitals. We're seeing difficulties in FQHCs in primary care. In my county, they closed the doctor's office in Stowe and now moved everything to Morrisville. St. Johnsbury is downsized the number of days they offer dialysis. They're talking about ending dialysis in a number of different hospitals around in rural Vermont around the state. The only way to get disadvantaged populations, whether they're old people or Medicaid or populations that need help to services, is through transport and with transportation. And we take some steps to lay the ground in this to do that. We also take steps in the area around transit for the monies that we hand to our communities. We've always based our money on our communities and considered it a success when we increase spending for our communities by CPI. Well, I have to tell you that CPI within, or the inflationary cost of projects within transportation have gone up more than double digit, and I'm going to cover that in the little report that Joint Fiscal helped me put together to lay out the problem for you. We never look at in our communities what the real shape of their roads are, what the shape of their culverts are, what the shape of their paving is. We in this start a process to try to collect that information to begin to change the way we hand out money to communities. That's forward thinking. The medical transports is forward thinking. We've done this with a balanced budget with help from the general fund. But we can't keep this up forever. You have on your desk a summary of some of the issues that we're facing, and I'm going to try to quickly run through that before we run through the bill. If you turn to the first page, that is Transportation Fund Revenue Challenges. In the big blocks, and I'll try to do this quickly, our revenues are stagnant in transportation. It's partly because of fuel taxes, and a lot of people will say it's all electric cars. Well, growing electric cars, to Gus' point, have been challenging within the transportation fund. But there's hardly a car that, or a truck that's out there that isn't more fuel efficient than it was 20 years ago. In Texas, where they haven't had the uptake in electric cars like what, 75% of the loss in revenues in their transportation fund in Texas is due to the fact that we have more efficient cars. So the fuel taxes are at issue. It's demographics. We have an older population with less people working, so people don't have to get in their car every single day and go to work. So they're extending the time where they buy cars out. Our fees are flat. Our fees only go up when we raise them. We have only raised them once in the last 9 years. That causes issue. The January 2025 census forecast estimates a 1.2% compound annual growth rate in the T fund between 2025 and 2030. When you're facing inflationary increases of double digit in projects, a 1.2% increase just doesn't cut it. It doesn't do anything. Our cost pressures are increasing faster than transportation revenue. The National Highway Construction Cost Index from 2020 to now has project costs up 62%. Our own agency of transportation will tell you that the cost of their project at the state level went up 40% between 2021 and 2023. When you have revenue increases that are at 1.2%, you can't keep up. If we next year can't figure out, when we're back here at the same time next year, can't figure out how to deal with some of these issues, and next year, given a steady state of where we are, our own transportation agency estimates that in state funds, we will have a $30 million shortfall. That $30 million shortfall, because the average match for us is 17% state and the rest federal, will mean that we would leave nearly $150 million on the table next year. The year after that, it grows to $45 million in state funds, and we would leave $220 million on the table. That, we've never left federal dollars on the table. And given where we are and with the state of transportation, we can't afford to do that. One of the points I need to make in this is that the further you fall behind in capital infrastructure, the harder it is to catch up. So this problem compounds itself unless we begin after this to pay attention to where we are. I would turn the page, and what you see in the chart is the gap between the transportation fund past and the forecast of going ahead. And you can see how the gap going forward is growing. The sheet you have beyond that, transportation revenue, you see the 1.22% growth, but you can see the gas tax over between 2023 and 2030 will shrink. You see the shrinkage in diesel. Purchase and use would increase by 3.2%. DMV fees and miscellaneous revenue. Our revenues in transportation, unlike the general fund, which goes up because its major funding source is income tax, the ed fund, we all know that real estate has gone up, and that increases revenue to the ed fund with the increase in the value of property around. In the T fund, all of our major sources are flat or declining. It's not good. So if you turn the page, and these are estimates from the Vermont Transportation Funding Study that was conducted with the Agency of Transportation, what you see for the 10-year transportation cost estimate and a steady state where we are in projects, you see in 2026 a $316 million hole, growing by FY35 to a $680 million hole. That's all funds, that's state, that's all funds. But that gives you an idea of the magnitude of the problem transportation is facing after this year going forward. You can see in the next chart, which is the Agency of Transportation, federal funds and state funds matching outlook. You can see the 30 million we're short. You can see the 149.5 that we can't match without help. You see in FY28 the 45 million and the 220 to give you some background. You turn the page and we talk about transportation projects and their cost. The point of this chart is really to tell you if we let things fall, projects get more expensive. If you have to reconstruct a highway at its most expensive and you have to dig up the whole highway, you're talking about something between $5 and $15 million a mile. Most of the time, we try to do leveling and overlay and try to, which is kind of a mid-level piece. It's $600,000 to $750,000 a mile. You can see the different levels. If what we're headed for is a place where we let our roads go and a majority of our roads become poor or very poor, we're costing ourselves more money. The next chart that you see the colored chart with the green, the light green, and the purples is where you see in 2025 poor roads and very poor roads, we're at about 26%. Or in where we are that are in poor or very poor roads. If you look at that chart, by the time you get to 2029, 4 years from today, over 60% of our roads will be poor or very poor. And this is estimates that come from our own agency of transportation and that. If you look at the chart before that, and the worse our roads get, the more expensive they are, we're digging a hole. We will be digging a hole after this year. There's a nice picture of those roads and their condition. Just to switch gears a little, the next to the last, or nearly the third from the last page in this, is a picture of inflation. And you can see the huge increase in inflation in cost. You see a line for growth in revenue in the T fund. And the bottom line in this is the increase in help we've given our towns in the upkeep of their roads. We're falling behind and we're leaving our local communities behind. I would make the point to you that when we talk about the Ed Fund and we talk about property taxes, in many of our small towns, 80% of their municipal budget is property taxes for the upkeep of roads. This gives you an idea of how far behind we're falling for our communities. Turn the page and you can see over the next 3 years the hole in the maintenance of our public transit system if we are trying to just maintain where we are. I'm not talking about growth in the system. Mostly what we're talking about across the board is a maintenance of where we are. To maintain where we are within 3 years, there's a $3.6 million, almost a $3.4 million hole in public transit. We're falling behind for our towns. We're falling behind on public transit. As we look forward, we're really at a place where we're at the edge of a cliff. The last point in this shows you the historic gasoline taxes adjusted for inflation and where we are based upon the cost that people would pay for gasoline and the cost for families. We are practically the lowest we've been adjusted for inflation in gasoline costs since the 1920s. That all said, this year's budget, I think, is well constructed. We worked hard as a committee because of sources from the general fund and from FEMA and those other places. We've been able to put together a budget that I think works for Vermont. My warning is, going forward, that's not going to continue. And this is something that all of us in the legislature are going to have to pay attention to. This can't be done in a transportation committee alone. This can't be done by hoping it goes away. The problems in transportation are immense, and they bump up against all of the other major funds in the state, the general fund, the education fund, all of them. It isn't lost upon me that our only growing revenue source, a third of it, purchase and use, goes to the Ed Fund. It isn't lost upon me that the sales tax leaves the general fund and goes to the ed fund. Both funds have given up a lot to maintain the ed fund the way it is. We have structural problems across the board. And the Transportation Committee is willing to work on these, but we can't do it alone. And we need all of you to help us going forward as we look at this problem. At this time, going to yield to my committee members, and starting with the member from Grand Isle, and let them go through the budget, and then I will come back and finish up. We were unanimous in our support of this, and I'm quite proud of the committee and the work we've done.
The senator from Lamoille yields to the senator from Grand Isle.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be running you through the first 10 sections of the bill, starting in your today's calendar, page 1029. Section 1 basically adopts the 2026 transportation program and provides definitions that we use in the bill. Section 2 is the rail program. That is a small section that just basically makes technical corrections to an error in the rail program, and it replaces the Wacker subsidy, that's the Washington County Rail, with the White River Junction depot repairs, and that's approximately $260,000. Section 3, unobligated transportation fund balance. It just requires the T fund to have an unobligated balance of $686,000 at the beginning of FY26. That's to cover fee reductions in the DMV bill and tax reductions in S46, which was the forestry bill passed earlier in the session. Section 4, state and federal funding updates. This requires AOT to provide updates on the status of state and federal funds. Those updates would be on 9/30/25 and 12/15/25. Permits the Secretary of Transportation also to request a JTOC meeting in the event of significant changes to funding changes to revenues. It requires a detailed report if those state or federal fund decrease by more than 4%. Section 5 amends 19 VSA, the 10G annual report. This is a new section requiring AOT to create a dashboard showing status of projects on time, on budget performance, beginning on January 1st, 2026, and to provide quarterly updates to the transportation committees in both the House and Senate. Section 6 amends 19 VSA 10G, basically repealing the old 10G report requirements effective July 1st, 2026. It also creates a one legislative session overlap so that we, as we transition to the new dashboard. Section 7 is the relinquishment of Vermont Route 36 in St. Albans. It authorizes the Secretary of Transportation to relinquish a portion of Vermont Route 36 in St. Albans to St. Albans. Section 8 redesignates 5 VSA Chapter 58. That section is currently entitled State Acquisition of Railroads, and it would be renamed State-Owned Railroads and Rail Trails. Moving on to Section 9, that would amend 5 VSA 3408 rail banking notification. It adds a cross-reference to rules adopted in 3408 of a previous section this is would add a new section, according to section 6 of the bill. And finally, not finally yet, section 10 lists a number of activities that are prohibited on a rail trail right-of-way. I won't go into those. There are a number of items that are not prohibited and a number that are. Be happy to discuss later if you have any questions. I'm going to skip from section 10 to the last section that I have for continuity. It's section 31, and I'm not sure exactly what page it's found on. 1050, page 1050. Section 31 is ultra-low volume vehicle manufacturing, cars such as a kit car. Anybody who was looking at the steps about a month ago, we had a great example of these cars. They're built, some at home, some in manufacturing facilities, but they also are very low volume of cars. I think under 325 would qualify you as an ultra-low volume vehicle manufacturer. This requires the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles, in consultation with ANR, to examine ways to facilitate issuance of VIN numbers for these cars. It also would facilitate opportunities to register them and to provide a process for emissions and safety certification. This would probably include discussion similar to the California waivers for emission that they have there for ultra-low volume vehicles out in California. And that concludes the sections that I'll be presenting today. I would now yield to the Senator from Windham, Senator Harrison.
The senator from Grand Isle yields to the senator from Windham.
Thank you. So my sections go from section 11 through section 17, and you'll find section 11 on page 1036. And both sections 11 and 12 deal with the Transportation Board. Section 11, it makes neither change is significant to the board. They're both ways to help the board operate more efficiently. Right now, the governor appoints the members of the commission, of the board, and of the chair. And section 11 would allow the governor and would allow the board to vote for other officers. Right now, the only officer is the chair. So this change would allow the board to vote for, to appoint other officers. Section 12 specifies what's been happening, which is that the agency provides appellate review relating to bids in the competitive negotiation process, and that has to do with services that the agency gets from contractors. The primary duties of the Transportation Board are other legal issues that could be a conflict. So those are not part of this. So section 12 is just codifies what we're already doing. Section 13, you may have heard of the changes that are proposed to happen with the Green Mountain Transit Authority and other providers of public transportation. And this section amends the area of operation, and it specifies that it will be the urbanized area of Chittenden County with the possibility of providing service elsewhere as determined by the Agency of Transportation. And what that does is it allows for some amendments in the future because we need flexibility in the way that we provide our public transportation program. Section 14 amends state aid for town highways, and this is really important because not only is the state
having challenges with funding transportation facilities, but so are towns, as you probably know. And what this section does is it adds an inflation adjustment to appropriations and minimum approved grants amount for state aid for town highway structures and to the Class 2 highway road program. And so the inflation adjustment for the two programs will be the same as the existing inflation adjustment for general state aid for town highways. So this puts more of the revenue that goes to towns in the category of things that get adjusted for inflation, which is really important. Section 15, cancellation of locally managed projects. This improves the process. Process obviously makes a difference, and this will have it will require AOT with consultation of VLCT and VAPTA to engage a consultant to review statutes governing recovery of funds following cancellation of local projects to identify potential changes. So this helps the municipalities and the transit agencies to work together more effectively in a financial matter. So section 16 is municipal transportation assets. And as the chair showed in a couple of the charts, our roads are not all in good shape. And one of our challenges when we look at future needs for funding is that we don't know the condition of the town roads. We know the condition of the state roads. We're very good at that. But we don't know the condition of the town highways and roads. And so that's what this section does, is it requires a determination of a method to be able to assess the town highway needs, which is critical and fundamental to establishing what we need as a state in terms of funding. And then section 17 is also a process improvement. And what that does is it says that the agency needs to look at its processes. You may be familiar with grants that go to towns. There's all sorts of individual grants that go to towns. The process is not always easy for towns, especially small towns. And so this language requires that AOT engage a consultant to review the state's town highway aid and municipal transportation grant programs to identify potential efficiencies and improvements. So when we do send money to the towns, we want it to be easy to access, and that's what the goal of section 17 is. And now I will yield to the senator from Washington.
Senator from Wyndham yields to the senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be doing sections 18 through 25. First, section 18 is the MBUF, which is the mileage-based user fee section. This is amending Act 62 from 2023, which we first said we were going to move towards a mileage-based user fee. And as the chair of the committee explained, there's some challenges in the transportation fund that the mileage-based user fee is a way to move away from the gas tax to actually charging vehicles for the use of the roads for each mile that they drive. So you would calculate how many miles you drive and you would be charged the fee based on how often you're using our roads. This was passed, as I said, in 2023. Some federal funding delays caused some delays in the program, so we're updating the dates. We're saying it's not going to be July 2025, but in the future, maybe in 2027. But you'll notice on page 1042 where this starts, subdivision 4, they can't start it until the General Assembly has enacted legislation. So we wanted to see the whole plan. We wanted to see what the rates were. We wanted to see all the details before we actually put this into place where Vermonters would be charged this fee, because it could be controversial. There was a lot of discussion in the committee over the last couple of years about the switch from the gas tax to a mileage-based user fee. So we wanted to make sure we had all the information before we actually put put it into play. So you'll also see that there's other sections from that Act 62, so it's amending. So when you see like section 27, that's of the Act 62, not of this bill. It also talks about the possibility of having a fee on the electricity. We do move to more electric transportation, and Vermonters are using electricity to charge their vehicle. They're not paying a gas tax. They are now paying an infrastructure fee annually hooked to their registration. But this looks more at, could we put a fee on the electricity? So the more electricity they use to charge their car, the more they would pay to the transportation fund. It also adds a section in here about how they would set the mileage-based user fee, and they would set it on what the average car would drive over a year. The other sections, there's this intent section about how much money the mileage-based user fee would raise, section 19. There's a report in section 20 from AOT in both September of 25 and December of 25 regarding the federal funds, because they're gonna, if they get the federal funds, that's what they're gonna use to design this whole mileage-based user fee system. So section 21, which starts on page 1045, this is authorizing $325,000 to continue the contract with Drive Electric Vermont, which runs a website, Drive Electric VT. So if you have any interest in electric cars, even if you don't like electric cars, go look at driveelectricvt.com, because it has all the information that you want to know about electric vehicles in Vermont, their incentives, testimonials from people driving in the winter, the fees that you have to pay. It's a very good website, and we're going to continue to fund into the future. That's section 21. Section 22 is some definitions. We wanted to make sure we had vehicles miles traveled defined properly. Section 23 is, and section 23, 24, and 25 are all sections where we wanted to add to Agency of Transportation policies and planning documents and statutory language, that the goal to reduce vehicle miles traveled and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions was embedded into their policies and their programs. So you'll see that in a general statement in section 23, specifically about construction of highways and bridges in section 24, and specifically in the planning process in section 25. So those are my sections, and I now would like to yield to the senator from Windsor.
The senator from Washington yields to the senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a real honor to report the following sections, 25 through 30, for the transportation bill. 7 years ago, I was a first-time House member, and I sat in this chamber, and I listened to Senator Mazza start the T-bill, and I thought, one day, I want to be able to do that. So it's a real honor to be able to be here and to carry on the legacy of quality transportation work, and to do that under the tutelage of the senator from Lamoille has been quite an education. So section 25, if you follow along, I would recommend going to page 1046 in your calendar today. This continues on the theme that you just heard from the senator from Washington, which is our planning process, and how do we properly address the needs of responding to the climate crisis through our planning process. We add a line to say that we would like to strive to reduce vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions. So we are striving to reduce the amount of miles that every individual driver in Vermont takes through our planning process. That is in line with many other goals we have in the Climate Action Plan and the CEP. That's section 25 for you. Section 26 through section 30 really reflects a specific type of program that we've had in our state for many years that supports our most vulnerable Vermonters. These are Vermonters who do not typically have access consistently to a vehicle to aid them in the transportation to medical appointments or to other services that are very essential to their life. So if you have a constituent who is on Medicaid, who needs to get to a doctor's appointment but does not have consistent access to a vehicle in their home, this is the type of program that they are utilizing to get to their doctor's appointment, to go pick up their prescriptions, to potentially go to the grocery store. All of those things that are basic essentials of life that if they weren't provided for through a service by the state, we would see deep difficulties. So Section 26 appropriates $600,000 to the Agency of Transportation for grants to public transportation agencies to hire volunteer coordinators to identify, recruit, and retain additional volunteer drivers for the state's demand response transportation programs. So what does that mean? We currently have volunteer drivers, people who out of the goodness of their heart and some mileage reimbursement will be that person who drives your constituent from their home to their appointments or to the grocery store. We are struggling to find those drivers. There are fewer and fewer volunteers every year who are able to participate in these programs, and we think that an infusion, an investment, if we go so far to say that, to identify and recruit more drivers will help shore up that program, which has lots of demand, but not as much in way of drivers who are available to meet the needs of our constituents. The second, Section 27 continues that, where we require DEVA to provide a detailed analysis of a proposed contract for the non-emergency medical transportation services to Joint Fiscal to JFC for review and approval prior to the execution of the contract. We had a lot of discussion in committee on this, but there seems to be some breakdowns in communication on how we can actually facilitate those non-emergency medical transportation services in coordination with DEVA. So we'd like to get some answers there. Section 28 requires DEVA to meet with important stakeholders, VPTA, which is Vermont Public Transportation Authority, the Agency of Transportation, and other stakeholders to identify potential opportunities to expand the Medicaid non-emergency transportation pool of volunteer drivers. So continuing that theme, how do we get these volunteer drivers? What are the barriers? And one of the big barriers we heard from the public transportation providers was a very lengthy, I believe 6 or 7 step background check process for our volunteers. And while obviously we want safe background checked volunteers, there's also a level of bureaucratic complexity that seems to be causing a delay or lowering interest in volunteer drivers. So we want to figure out how can we address that? How can we get folks in the door to be able to volunteer drive? Section 29 requires that the Department of Motor Vehicles, in consultation with that public transit authority I mentioned earlier, identifies and pursues opportunities to make the public aware of volunteer and community driver opportunities related to that demand transportation program we're discussing. It also requires DEVA to identify and pursue opportunities to increase awareness of volunteer community driver programs for potential volunteers and individuals who might use that service. And then the last section I have is the coordination of healthcare and transportation services within a working group. It requires the Agency of Transportation to convene a working group to improve the coordination of healthcare and transportation services for individuals who enroll in demand transportation programs. And before I yield to the senator from Lamoille, I just wanted to give you a couple statistics on this service, because I think if you don't use it, you might not be aware of it. But we know that there were over 530,000 riders last year in SFY 2024 who used this program. And we know that that was a cost of around $26.6 million and a cost per ride of about $50. So this is a widely used program by our most vulnerable Vermonters, but it also comes at a cost. So we need to continue to shore up our volunteer driver pool and support the agencies that do this work so we can continue to provide this service to our constituents. So with that, I would yield not to the senator from Grand Isle, because he already did Section 31, but rather yield to the senator from Lamoille for the remaining sections.
Senator from Windsor yields to the senator from Lamoille.
So we'll start at Section 32. Section 32 deals with leases for railroad and the review of those leases by the legislature in the state. Section 33 deals with marking underground utility and facilities. It extends the time for marking underground utilities from 48 hours to 72. This is something that was in the budget adjustment twice when we passed it. And because we're headed into construction season, people are anxious to have that this move along. Section 34 is maintenance of underground utility facilities markings. Section 35 deals with town highways. It clarifies municipalities having the authority to maintain legal trails. Section 36 is the effective dates. At this point in closing, what I would like to say is thank you to our JFO staff, Chris and Logan, who are here in the chamber. Megan, who is our committee assistant, Damian Leonard, who is our counsel. AOT has been invaluable in their help. I see a couple members of the agency here. And I would also like to say thank you to the Health and Welfare Committee, who did meet with us and take testimony with us around the very important issue of medical transports that we take very seriously. As I said before, we voted 5-0-0 on this. I would, at the end, if you have any questions in the overall, the sheet transportation appropriation overview is a good snapshot of everything. You can see the nearly $900 million in spending, $883 million, and with 330 of that coming from the T fund, 452 million coming from federal funds, and then various other funds, including the TIB bond fund and interdepartmental transfers. What this is between our federal and our state dollars, it's nearly a 50-50 match when you trace back the dollars to everything. But this is a nearly $900 million spending on it. Thank you.
Recognize the senator from Chittenden District, Senator Chittenden, for the report of the Committee on Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Due to the great work of the Senate Transportation Committee, they presented a transportation bill that has a de minimis impact on state revenues. But something tells me from the storm clouds the Senator from Lamoille was describing, next year's finance report on the T-bill won't be nearly as short. So your committee did vote 7-0-0 in support of this bill, Mr. President.
Recognize the senator from Washington District, Senator Perchlik, for the report of the Committee on Appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're lucky to have a quorum of members of the Transportation Committee on the Appropriations Committee. So we knew quite thoroughly what was happening in the transportation bill. So it was a quick discussion to vote 7-0-0 to recommend that it ought to pass in concurrence with the Transportation Committee's bill. Although I'd say that there, two of the things that do affect the general fund is the JTOC transfer. Transportation used to send $20 million over to the general fund to help with the state police and other general fund expenses towards our roads. So that's you could say it's a $20 million expense to the general fund, but it's something that we supported as a way to support the transportation fund, as you heard the issues there. Also, we knew about this amendment that the Transportation Committee was going to be presenting, specifically the second instance where they were going to spend on the non-medical transport issues you heard about. They're going to spend general fund. So we found a way to move some money from the pilot funds to support the program so that some T funds could be freed up so that we didn't have to use general funds for that. So for those reasons, the Appropriations Committee supported the bill 7-0-0.
The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Transportation? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I might inquire of two of the presenters. First, the chair of the committee, I believe, on the overall fiscal outlook.
Senator from Memorial is here.
Mr. President, I was struck by the presentation, and I believe it was effective in letting us know going forward what the challenges would be. My question, Mr. President, is about 27, and I'm wondering, in terms of the cliff that the senator described, is the mileage-based user fee the major attempt to close that gap? And if so, what is the timing for when those monies would begin coming into the general fund, or the transportation?
So what I would say to you is I really don't think in an overall picture, and my plea to this body and to the state as a whole and the whole legislature and the administration is we need to really pay attention to this. You're not going to solve this problem by single instances. You're not going to, you know, we have people that have ideas here about delivery fee on Amazon and Wayfair goods. We have people that talk about indexing the gas tax. Those two things together might raise $5 million. We have 12% of our cars that are electric that we want to move to a mileage-based user fee. That's not going to solve our problem. They're helpful steps, but they aren't going to solve the problem. What my plea to this body is, my plea to the state is, and the flag I raise is, we're going to have to think of this in much broader pictures. $30 million is not going to be solved by a few small steps. It has to be a package. So in that, I think we have steps, and that's a step that's important, but it doesn't solve the whole problem.
And just one follow-up, Mr. President. If a package is necessary, would the Transportation Committee be next year bringing that package to us, or is the expectation that that committee will work with, say, the Appropriations?
I think there's no illusion that we can do this alone in transportation. This is clearly something that finance is going to have to work on. This is clearly something that we're going to have to deal with the Appropriations Committee. This is clearly something that we're all going to have to dig in and put together a package around. We can't do this alone in transportation. I'm afraid if the Transportation Committee, and I would counsel against doing this mileage-based fee, something little here, something little. What we do has to be a package that comes up and solves the problem. We can't be voting on 5 or 6 little pieces that never pull everything all together. And my plea is the Transportation Committee can't do this alone.
I thank the senator, and I thank him also for his leadership on the Transportation Committee this year. He has done a fine job. My second question is for the senator from Grand Isle, if I might.
The senator from Grand Isle is interrogated.
And this regards section 7 on page 1033 about the relinquishment of Vermont Route 36. I'm just curious what the circumstances are there. I don't believe the senator detailed them. Why would the relinquishment be necessary?
Yes, I did not, Senator, Mr. President. That section of Vermont 36 has a number of utilities in it, sewer, electrical, and this constantly being worked on by the town, city of St. Albans, and they requested that turned over to them so that they could adequately handle that stretch.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I thank the senator. And I'll just say that I hear the plea from the chair of transportation. It seems to me something that the chairs of the money committees and the transportation committee will need to have their heads together on. So my office will start to look at ways to further that consultation as we go to the end of the session. Thank you, Mr. President.
I would recognize the senator from Lamoille for an amendment for the committee.
Certainly because we, in this place, there are deadlines and you have to move things through. We moved the bill out to get it to appropriations, and this past week, we spent some time playing cleanup. So what you're mostly going to hear in this amendment that is all of us on transportation together are offering is on page 1055. In the first instance, there's we, for a number of years now, have put together on a section within the T-bill that outlines transportation investments intended to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce fossil fuel use, and things that saved households money. And you will find that in the first instance of our amendment. The second instance of our amendment deals with the moving of 1.15 million authorized to be used for non-federal disaster relief for town highways for the T-Fund to the pilot special fund. This is where you'll see the money that we turn around. So the money that goes into medical transports is transportation money, but it's money that we got as a shift out of the surplus that's in the pilot fund. This is for 1 year. Third instance is where you will see the $600,000 authorized to provide grants for transit agencies to hire volunteer coordinators for from the general fund to the transportation fund. That's where you see us hire the 4 people to do the recruitment of people. I might add to what the senator from Windsor said. In 2019, we had 300 people across the state doing medical transports, volunteering their time and getting paid for their mileage, but volunteering their time. During COVID, that dropped to 150. We're back up to 175, but there is no organized effort across our 5 public transit agencies to recruit people. This will be the first time in a statewide attempt we've taken to recruit people. And given the uncertain future in Medicaid, given the hospitals that are downsizing, giving the downsizing of services, particularly in rural Vermont, we think that if we can organize the effort to recruit people, we've got a really good chance to move this along. But that amendment deals with that. In the fourth instance, which is section 27, is Medicaid non-emergency transit. This is where we enlist DEVA to work with the public transit agencies to talk about putting together materials for that recruitment effort. And in the fifth instance, it deals with outreach for volunteer drivers. And this amendment is offered by all the members of transportation.
The question is, shall the recommendation of proposal of amendment of the Committee on Transportation be amended by the senator from Lamoille and others? Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I interrogate the presenter of the amendment?
The presenter of the amendment is interrogated.
Mr. President, as this might be the last time to really get into the dollars and cents represented in the appropriations, that we find in our FY25 versus FY26 spreadsheet. That's the majority of what I've been looking at through the presentation to better understand the cumulative impact on Vermonters in our transportation system. And as somewhat of a layperson in looking at the transportation budget, what I see taking the biggest hit, Mr. President, are bridges, traffic and safety, aviation, and Department of Public Safety. So I'd like to inquire of the presenter, Mr. President, of how we might explain to our constituents and others how that does not represent an impact to transportation safety concerns that
Senator
people
from
might have.
Chittenden, it sounds like you should wait till after we finish this amendment to make your question more broadly on the bill. We are currently debating the amendment that is in the calendar.
Mr. President, I will absolutely wait. The way I approached this interrogation was recognizing that additional appropriations are made to things that are not public safety related, and worried about if those funds are being well spent vis-a-vis the huge hits to the public safety sections of the budget.
Okay, you may continue your interrogation.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So let me first say the proposal from the administration, long held, and the public safety pieces, there's $20 million that the T Fund has supported for quite a long time that went towards public safety. That grew out of the JTOC transfer, which has long been going. Started in 1991, and it was partly because the largest deficit, I think, in our state's history was right during that period of time. There was a package put together, a third transportation, tiers on the income tax, letting go 450 state employees, and JTOC started. Long held, a lot of people have tried to move away from that transfer from the T Fund into the general fund, and it's taken since 1991 to get to the place where that's gone away. This was an attempt this year, a flat 20 million, reduce that, and the state police become a expense for the general fund. It's flat money, it's not increasing in that piece, and the general fund will pick up that piece. That's part of the 20 million that make this transportation bill, put this transportation bill into a place where we can put together a budget that works. That's money, though, that's not growing into the future and is a totally flat source, which in the future becomes a problem for the T Fund. So those services are not cut, they're in the general fund. The next piece that you talk, when you look at, you have to be very careful about projects and where they are. When you do a bridge project on the interstate, sometimes you're looking at a project that's 20, 30, 40 million dollars and can be misconstrued. Our bridges, I would say to you, are in quite good shape now. The issue for us more is in areas like paving and those construction projects that have a shorter term life. We did very well. If you see the line where there's the TIB bond fund, the TIB bond fund monies are specific towards bridges. And we've done a very good job to catch up with in the 2009, 2010 period with the money during the Great Recession. And then after Irene, we did a lot of things to catch up. fast forward to now, we have some flexibility in bridges. So we're in good shape around bridges, but a lot of that is project driven, and it takes a number of years to get a project up to a place where you expend the money. So that bridge line will go up and down.
Mr. President, may I inquire about the traffic and safety line losing 10%?
You may.
So here's what I will do. Before third reading, I will get back to you with the absolute specifics about that, because I don't have the real nitty-gritty about that.
I thank the member, and I hope by third reading, we would be able to hear about more of the details related to traffic and safety, aviation, and town highway bridges. Thank you, Mr. President.
Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall a recommendation of proposal of amendment of the Committee on Transportation be amended as moved by the Senator from Lamoille and others? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the recommendation of proposal of amendment of the Committee of Transportation. The question now is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Transportation as amended? Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a few questions for different presenters. First, may I inquire of the senator from Grand Isle?
The senator from Grand Isle is interrogated.
Thank you. My question is about Section 3, and I'm trying to understand why at a point in time when we are on the edge of a crisis in the transportation fund, there are fee reductions and tax reductions being suggested.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, in Section 3, those, that $686,000 was a result of it resulted in two bills being passed out of Senate Transportation. One was S-46, the forestry bill, which created a tax break, a sales tax break for forestry equipment. If you recall, we passed that on the Senate floor about a month ago. That was about $333,000. The other one was a reduction or an elimination of license fees for SST, SSS, SSI.
SS something.
Here. And it was an elimination of license fees for those folks who qualified. We took a great deal of testimony on those two items. We were cognizant of the deficit it would create in DMV fees, and we did pass those two bills out thinking we were doing good work, and I do think that today they were valuable pieces for our forestry community and for SSI recipients. So we were aware of that, and we passed both of those bills out, I believe, 5-0.
I thank the senator. The explanation makes it make sense to me. My next question is for the senator from Windsor.
The senator from Windsor is interrogated.
I actually meant Wyndham, I'm sorry.
The senator from Wyndham is interrogated.
The wrong senator stood up. It's on Section 13, and I'm wondering if there's a definition of urbanized and if this section is meant to help build out microtransit.
Thank you for the question, Mr. President. I believe there is a definition, but I'd like to double check that.
I can wait till third reading.
Okay, great.
Thank you. And then my last question is on the appropriation. So I think that would be best or my last question is for the senator from Lamoille.
The senator from Lamoille is interrogated.
I'm wondering, I'm noticing, and I certainly hear in my community that there have been reductions in public transportation and there is a current deficit in what is needed in the public transportation. So I'm wondering why we are further reducing the spending in public transportation when we already have deficits in that system.
So there was a very extensive study done about service models and where services are over the last year in public transit. There is underlying in this, what you see is a number of shifts in service area coming. And here in Washington County, in Franklin County, some in Lamoille, and mostly here in the northern part of the state. Green Mountain Transit, which is mostly in Chittenden County, but does move into each, has offered in a service area services. They're really good at fixed bus routes. What they really aren't good at is medical transports, micro transports, and anything that is out in rural Vermont. The overall plan that what they came up with is that Green Mountain Transit will move out of the more rural areas. They will maintain fixed bus routes where and stick to what their forte is. And for example, RCT, which is in the Northeast Kingdom, will start to take up, and the transit agency that runs through Addison in Orange County are going to pick up the rural routes that where they can do micro transit, they can do medical transits, and they are better at that. The indication for us was, and in doing that, they created some savings in the system. All of the testimony that we took in committee, and we took quite extensive testimony, indicated that no one would be left behind, and they felt they could do a better service for those people with the two other transit agencies that are picking up that service, which is service that they clearly are better at than Green Mountain Transit was. They may not be as good at running fixed routes as Green Mountain Transit, but they aren't as good in the dispersed service. What that overall plan did was create some savings for this year. I would say to you, though, going forward in the future, and you can see in the chart that we presented with the overall plan, with the overall work and the trouble in transportation, we can't maintain our public transit services going forward into the future without some help. And that's another area where when you get past this budget, we really need to pay attention.
That is helpful to understand the restructuring. Does this spending allow for the routes that have already been canceled in Chittenden County to be reinstated?
It doesn't.
Okay, it maintains.
And I might say going forward, the pressure on our public transit agencies are going to be, are just growing.
That's helpful. I'm a little concerned that we're not reinstating those recently cut routes, but that's okay. My next question is about paving, and if this paving budget represents any investment in new technology that may withstand longer in our sometimes harsh conditions.
I think the Agency of Transportation is always looking for new technologies and places to go. What I would say in the overall in transportation is what you're looking at in this in transportation at this time is not a lot of new things in any area, It's mostly a maintenance of what we have.
I thank the senator.
Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Transportation as amended? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have proposed to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Transportation as amended. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you've ordered third reading of H 488. We have on the calendar for action SR 13. It was introduced on April 25th, 2025. It was referred to the Committee on Judiciary, which reports it has considered the bill and recommends that it ought to be adopted. Listen to the second reading of the resolution.
SR 13. Senate resolution strongly objecting to the manner and circumstances under which U.S. immigration authorities arrested and detained Mohsen Madawi and strongly advocating that he be afforded due process under the law and released immediately from detention.
Recognize the senator from Chittenden, Senator Baruth, for the report of the Committee on Judiciary.
Thank you, Mr. President. SR 13 addresses a case with which we are all now very familiar, I would assume. Mohsen Madawi, a resident of White River Junction and a beloved member of his community, was told that he was going to face his final interview to become a U.S. citizen, and instead that interview turned out to be a ruse to detain Mohsen Madawi, and we can only assume to quickly spirit him out of our jurisdiction. Instead, Madawi was prepared. He and his community members and their legal representatives filed with the court quickly enough to prevent him from being moved. He is now being held and detained in Vermont, and he has been going through his hearings under the protections of due process. But those protections for due process kicked in only with that court order that was produced by the quick-thinking legal team and community members he was partnering with. Absent those protections, due process might have been completely avoided. So this is an issue about which the Vermont Senate has a direct tie. We had a senator on site, who I will yield to in a moment, who witnessed that detention and managed to communicate it to the rest of the state and to the nation at large. And I think of a documentary that I show in my class on 9/11, and in it, the documentary filmmaker says, there is always a witness in history, and we have a witness in our chamber. And I think that has helped us to see the urgency of this moment. So I would direct senators to the general writing of this. Our chair took the position that we would discuss this, not necessarily ask for testimony. If we understood the plain language of it and agreed with it, we would vote it out to the full Senate. So that's what we did. And I believe it comes to you on a 4-1-0 vote. But it is strongly worded, and you'll see the word strongly appears several times. And it does not mince words about the manner and circumstances of Madawi's detention. So as to the circumstances, it points out his place and his place in the hearts of his community. It also points out how long he has been a resident here and a legal resident, a green card holder. Those are key details. But I would ask senators to focus on the manner of his detention. And without objection, Mr. President, I'll just read that whereas clause. in the middle of the resolution, whereas instead of commencing the interview, armed immigration authorities in plain clothes with faces covered arrested Mosen Madawi and refused to provide any information regarding where he was being taken or what would happen to him. There are 3 or 4 elements there that I find individually disturbing. The idea of facial coverings, the idea of unmarked vehicles, refusal to identify themselves, unmarked vehicles being used to spirit detainees away. All of those things are the hallmarks of authoritarian regimes. And I don't want to hesitate to point that out on this floor. So with that said, Mr. President, I believe that the case has been before us for several weeks. Senators have seen the language, which is unstinting in its condemnation of these actions. And with that, I would yield for the balance of the presentation to the senator from Windsor. Senator White.
From Chittenden Central yields to the senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'm so grateful for the 23 individuals who co-sponsored this resolution. I obviously thank the senator from Chittenden for spearheading this and moving it through committee along with the chair of Judiciary. If I may read from a National Public Radio interview that was done yesterday with Mr. Madawi.
You may.
I want to start with a quote about how he's feeling internally. I am centered, I am at peace. While I know deeply that it is a level of injustice that I am facing, I have faith. I have faith that justice will prevail. And I also want to read a quote that is very touching, because in the aftermath of his detainment, the response from Vermonters has been so clear and so loud. And it's been inspiring, because I feel that we have an obligation as a brave little state to stand up to injustice. And he says, to continue on in the quote, "So now it's up to the American people to decide what path they want to take. And what is the definition of government in our Constitution? It is we the people. And I am counting on the people who I've got the chance to know as kind-hearted, good people to stand up for what is right." And I just want to thank the body for considering this, because I think that when we reflect on the history of this current moment, that the Vermont Senate, if we have a unanimous passage, will be looked on very favorably with how we have stood as a government of the people who do not allow for the misuse and abuse of our justice system against individuals who are merely practicing lawful free speech. And I thank the body for their consideration, and I hope that we do have a unanimous vote to symbolize that stand with our constitutional freedoms. Thank you.
Are you ready for the question?
Roll call, Mr. President.
Roll call has been requested, so when the vote is taken, it shall be by roll. Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall the resolution be read a third time? Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I understand this is a pretty sensitive topic. I took some time this past weekend to talk to a retired U.S. Marshal to understand law enforcement procedures a little more in depth, because it's not necessarily an area of my expertise. So I could interrogate the senator from Wyndham.
If she so chooses.
Oh, I'm sorry, Windsor. My apologies.
Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm just curious if the senator is familiar, Mr. President, with the law enforcement procedures for protecting the identity of arresting agents.
Are you asking if I personally know those stats?
Mr. President, I am asking the senator, based on her comments today and about a week or so ago, if the senator is familiar with law enforcement procedures for protecting the identity of arresting agents.
Your agents, officers, whose policy are you asking me that I know of? Are you talking about Immigration and Customs Enforcement? Are you talking about federal agents? Are you asking about the Hartford Police Department?
Senator, I would remind you to address the president, and don't use the words "are you," please. It's an inappropriate line of question. Mr. President, is the senator asking would be the appropriate way to phrase it.
Mr. President, is the senator asking about ICE? Is the senator asking about my local jurisdiction's policy? Is the senator asking about the federal? What agency is the senator, Mr. President, asking me about?
Yeah, Mr. President, I understand the question from the senator. My question is fairly simple. What I'm seeking is if the senator is familiar in general with law enforcement procedures for protecting the identity of arresting law enforcement officials.
Point of information.
What is your point of information?
I'm wondering, I am the reporter for the resolution and it came through the Judiciary Committee. It's not typical to interrogate the introducer of a bill. And I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to ask the senator whether he's directing his questions to the right.
Senator from Chittenden, I said that the senator from Windsor was interrogated if she so chose, and she stood up, so I'm guessing that she chose to be interrogated.
I would yield to the President Pro Tem.
So, Mr. President, if I could, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate interjection.
Hang on, please. So, Senator from Chittenden, you may be seated. Senator from Windsor, if you do not wish to continue being questioned, you have that right and can state it or just can sit down. And the senator from Rutland can interrogate the presenter, the senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. The basis for asking the senator from Windsor on the question of identity or procedures was simply the fact that she was the only eyewitness observer that's in the chamber at the moment. So I'll retract my request for a comment and redirect my request to the senator from Chittenden, who was the presenter of the resolution.
The senator from Chittenden is interrogated.
Mr. President, the Judiciary Committee did not discuss typical procedure, but if I might, I would say that my understanding is that under certain circumstances, authorities do have the ability to go undercover or appear as plain clothes. I think what we're discussing here today is that this has become the hallmark of this administration, that they are clearly intending for purposes of demonstrating to the nation that their agents will do their work covered and unmarked and will refuse requests as to which agency they represent. That's what I see the resolution addressing, not an individual circumstance or an individual threat. I will say that I've seen video of people being picked up on the streets of American cities, approached by men with coverings over their faces and hustled into vans and driven away. I've seen that video. I'm sure many of us have. So we're not talking here, I don't believe, about typical police procedures and a judicious restraint in using those, but rather what I'm calling the hallmark of a policy of anonymity.
Thank you, Mr. President. And one more follow-up question for the senator of Chittenden, if I may. So, Mr. President, are you familiar with the procedures for sharing arrests?
Senator, I would remind you to please not use the word "you."
Understood. Mr. President, my apologies. Mr. President, I would like to know if the senator from Chittenden is familiar with the procedures for sharing arrest information to those who are accused versus those who are in the vicinity of those being accused. How much information is shared with the person who is not the accused?
Mr. President, that was not a part of our discussions, and as I said, we did not take testimony on that, so I'm not currently an expert in that category.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the reflection on the arrest and the comments. I'll simply reflect back to a law enforcement specialist who saw this, watched this arrest unfold and watched it a dozen times. And while absolutely unusual to have this kind of circumstance happen in Vermont, these procedures are in fact in keeping with law enforcement procedures. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Windsor.
I would just rise. It is my understanding that's typical police procedure to provide a warrant or to get a warrant when they arrest someone.
Senator from Wyndham.
Thank you. Mr. President, I would agree that the circumstances in this incident were unusual, but I would disagree that the practice of arresting people essentially anonymously without any identification is rather unusual. It is also unusual. There are circumstances, yes, when law enforcement goes undercover or presents as different identities when they're doing when they're investigating crimes against children on the internet. But this is like comparing apples to oranges, because we're talking about masked individuals who refuse to identify themselves, sweeping people into vans and taken away. That is unusual behavior in this country. Thank you.
Senator from Chittenden.
And Mr. President, one thing that I'd also like to point out, I think in a standard brand American presidency, a standard administration, you might give the benefit of the doubt in a certain instance and say that it was necessary for police to seek anonymity. But I would ask senators to consider, for instance, our new head of the Homeland Security flew to Venezuela and appeared in front of prisoners in a notorious prisoner where we are currently shipping detainees as a photo op. And we've seen that in a number of cases with this administration. They are very, very cognizant of the messages and the images they are putting out. I would suggest to the body that the anonymity, the idea of being picked up by masked individuals is no accident, that is a deliberate thing being communicated to American citizens. Do not interfere, do not inquire, do not prevent these detentions, or you yourself may be subject to such detention. So given the whole character and posture of this administration, this seems of a piece. The idea that these videos of people being picked up on American streets, hustled into vans, or in the case of Mohsen Madawi, that he was tricked, told that he was coming for his final interview, those are part of the messages being considered. So they are not a bug, they are a feature. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Essex.
Mr. President, I would say that the American public was tricked in a lot of different ways of flying in the dead of night into cities all across America without anybody being understood. Up to 20 million people into this country, basically illegally. And so if you want to talk about mass coverings, I think that's the biggest mass coverings that you could do in the middle of the night, early mornings, flying people in and not letting the public, even in the areas that they were flown into, be aware of the amount of illegal immigration that was perpetrated by the previous administration. And so I really don't think that there's much to talk about one over the other when it comes to about how things were done properly, Mr. President. Thank you.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Chittenden.
Mr. President, I just want to make sure we're all extremely clear before we take this vote what we are advocating for. And Mr. President, that is due process under the law. We have a federal judge appointed in Vermont, two federal judges appointed in Vermont, who we now know from court proceedings became aware that Mohsen Madawi had a plane ticket. His name was called at the airport. And if friends and family and others did not slow down the process of detention and disappearance of Mr. Madawi, that he would be on a plane out of his jurisdiction where he could not receive due process under the law. This, to me, is fundamental to the oath we take to our state constitution and our federal constitution, that we believe every person within our borders deserves due process under the law. That is the question at hand, Mr. President, and I hope we all keep that in mind as this roll call ensues.
Are you ready for the question? If so, the secretary shall call the roll.
Senator Baru.
Yes.
Senator Beck.
Yes.
Senator Breyer.
Yes.
Senator Brennan.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
Yes.
Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Douglas.
Yes.
Senator Gulick.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hart. Senator Hashim.
Yes.
Senator Heffernan.
Nay.
Senator Ingalls.
No.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator Major.
Yes.
Senator Matos.
Yes.
Senator Norris.
No.
Senator Perschlick.
Yes.
Senator Plunkett.
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Bohosky.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks.
No.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
No.
Senator Hart.
The yeas voting 24, the nays voting 5. The ayes have it, and you've ordered third reading of SR 13. That completes the orders of the day. Are there any announcements? Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs will be at 11:30. Thank you.
Senator from Wyndham.
Senate Judiciary will meet 5 minutes after the fall of the gavel.
Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Agriculture will meet 5 minutes after fall of gavel.
Senator from Burlington, Chittenden Southeast.
Williston, Chittenden Southeast. Senate Health and Welfare will meet at 11:35.
Senator from Chittenden Central.
In the spirit of pushing back against authoritarianism, I wanted to share with folks that this Saturday, May 3rd at 12 p.m., 12 noon, at the Chittenden Superior Court office in Burlington, which is 175 Main Street, there will be a protest organized by more than 300 lawyers. They will be marching to demonstrate their commitment to protecting the rule of law and to underscore the central importance to American democracy of insisting that federal agents and agencies follow the rule of law. Everyone is welcome. Leslie Black will be the MC, and speakers will be Harrison Stark from the ACLU, David Silver from the Criminal Defense, who's a criminal defense attorney, Charity Clark, our own Attorney General, Don Siebert, immigration attorney, and Elizabeth Shackelford, who's a columnist and former Foreign Service career diplomat. Hope you will join us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Natural Resources and Energy will meet 5 minutes after the fall again.
Senator from Bennington.
Mr. President, the Education Committee will meet at 1.
Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Government Operations will meet at 1:30.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance will meet at 1:30.
Are there any further announcements? Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending further announcements, I would move that the Senate stand in adjournment until 1 p.m. April 30.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, the senator from Chittenden has moved that the Senate stand in adjournment until 1 p.m. Wednesday, April 30th, 2025. Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and we'll stand in adjournment until 1 PM, Wednesday, April 30, 2025.